It was the 1920s, and Coca-Cola had a big problem. People mostly thought of their product as a refreshing drink in summer, but sales normally dropped substantially in the winter when it got colder. And this makes sense. Who gets in from the snow, feeling freezing cold, and immediately thinks, "I want a cold glass of Coke"? So Coca-Cola desperately needed a way to improve sales in winter. But just running more ads wasn't going to be enough to change people's perceptions of the product. They needed something that would create a deeper, long-lasting connection in consumers' minds between Coke and winter. And what's most people's favorite part about winter? Christmas. In fact, for many it's the happiest time of the whole year. A time of togetherness and joy and everything that Coca-Cola has always tried to associate itself with. Because the truth is, ever since Coke first began in the late 1800s, their success has always been built on one simple thing. They do not sell you on their product or its taste. Instead, they try to associate the feeling of happiness with drinking a Coke. So connecting Coke to Christmas would be the holy grail. So Coke thought, what if we could embed ourselves into this holiday? And what better way than the beloved figure of Santa, the personification of Christmas itself? Now, in present day, this may seem an obvious strategy, but remember, there's nothing inherently about Coke's product that connects to Christmas in any way. It's ultimately just an unhealthy fizzy drink, and there are many other similar products. And yet, if you asked pretty much anyone what brand they most associate with Christmas, the majority of people would probably say Coca-Cola. So, how did Coke pull this off? Well, although Coke tested a few different Christmas ads in the 1920s, the big breakthrough for them came in 1931, when Coca-Cola commissioned an illustrator named Haddon Sundblom to create a wholesome version of Santa Claus holding a bottle of Coke. Now, you may have heard that Coca-Cola designed the modern Santa Claus as we know him today, or that Coke is responsible for changing Santa's suit color to red and white to fit their branding. But neither of these things are true. The image of Santa as we know it today, the jolly fat guy with a red and white suit, white beard, and rosy cheeks, existed long before Coca-Cola's inclusion of him in their ads. In fact, Coke's illustrator who made the iconic Coca-Cola Santa ad was heavily influenced by the classic 1823 poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas's, or as it's more commonly known, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, which describes the cheerful Santa we know today. And many others before Coca-Cola, such as political cartoonist Thomas Nast, had already helped popularize the jolly Santa that we're now familiar with. This was an illustration from 1881, before Coca-Cola even existed. Or here's a cover from Puck magazine in December 1905, showing the modern red-suited Santa. However, whilst Coca-Cola did not invent this image of how Santa looks, they can definitely be credited with popularizing it and cementing this version of Santa as the Santa we all know today. You see, there used to be many different versions of Santa, different colors, like Santa in a green or tan suit. Or even sometimes Santa as an elf, or a scary Claus who punished children who misbehaved. So unlike today where we all pretty much have the same image in mind for what Santa looks like, back then there were many different variations. And that's because no single person or company created Santa, it was an evolution. In fact, the earliest concept comes from the folklore traditions of St. Nicholas all the way back in the 4th century, who was famous for giving gifts to the poor. But then over the years, elements from characters in different countries, like the English figure of Father Christmas and the Dutch figure of Sinterklaas, all kind of merged together into this figure we call Santa Claus. But that's where Coca-Cola comes in. Coke's marketing team realized that there was a very fortunate coincidence, that one of the most popular versions of Santa wore red and white, the same colors as Coca-Cola. So of course this is the version Coke always used in their advertising. And unsurprisingly, they also made sure Santa in their ads was always very cheerful, unlike some of the slightly meaner Santas that were drawn before Coke came along. And Coke's relentless ads every year meant that they massively helped popularize this specific version of Santa, as Coke's constant plastering of this imagery in magazines, billboards and shop displays gave people more exposure to this version, and reinforced it as the typical Santa. So basically, Santas that looked very similar to this were already popular before Coke's ads began. And it's believed the red and white colors may have come from the red and white bishop robes of St. Nicholas. But Coke's extensive advertising did play a big role in proliferating this specific version all over the world, and helped solidify it as the main one. And when you think about it, this makes sense. Coke creating some completely new version of Santa in totally different colors wouldn't have been anywhere near as effective as capitalizing on the existing Santa character who was already popular, and simply trying to attach their product to him. As the whole idea was to hijack something people already knew and loved. It began in 1931 with a campaign called, "My Hat's Off to the Paws That Refreshes." The tagline was, "Old Santa, busiest man in the world, takes time out for the pause that refreshes with ice-cold Coca-Cola." The idea behind it was that we all need to take a pause from the stress and busyness of everyday life and enjoy a moment of refreshment by having a Coke, even if you're Santa delivering all those presents. The ad ran in many popular magazines such as the Saturday Evening Post. But that was just the start. Every year Coca-Cola ran more and more Christmas ads featuring this version of Santa with Coca-Cola, to reinforce the association between Coke and Christmas. They continued to use the same illustrator every year between 1931 and 1964, which meant Santa's style remained consistent. It became an annual tradition to feature this version of Santa holding or drinking bottles of Coke. And the best part? Since nobody actually owns the rights to Santa, Coke don't even have to pay any royalties or fees to use the iconic character. Of course, they didn't just stop at Santa. They used other heartwarming winter imagery too, such as polar bears with Cokes, and then introduced the classic Coke trucks with Christmas lights. And the ads absolutely worked, not only increasing Coca-Cola sales in winter, but also achieving another important goal, targeting children. For many impressionable kids, seeing the beloved Santa figure constantly surrounded by Coca-Cola undoubtedly created a deep association between the product and the happy feelings of Christmas. This was actually crucial for Coke, as there's strong research to show if you can get kids to drink Coke when they're young, they're much more likely to become a customer for life. Not just that, but you may be familiar with the study of Pavlov's dogs. Pavlov was a Russian psychologist who did an experiment where right before he fed a group of dogs, he'd ring a bell. He did this again and again until eventually the dogs started salivating when the bell rang even if there wasn't any food present, because they'd been conditioned to think that the bell ringing meant food was coming. This was the discovery of classical conditioning. Now when it comes to Coca-Cola, a person may not initially have strong feelings towards Coke, but they do have strong positive feelings towards Christmas. Happiness, family, excitement, and so on. So by conditioning people every year in their ads that Coke and Christmas go together, just like Pavlov did with the bell and food, eventually people associate those same positive feelings with Coca-Cola. Now, whilst this was undoubtedly great work by Coke's marketing team, what's not so well known is that even before Coke had the idea of using Santa in their ads, a different drinks company had already done it. There are ads from a brand called White Rock Beverages at least 15 years before the first Coke Santa ad appears, in which a modern-style Santa is delivering presents, which includes White Rock water. This campaign led to the business becoming one of the largest producers of mineral water in the United States by 1923, and so they soon started using Santa to sell their ginger ale as well. Coke would certainly have been aware of these ads, and it's entirely possible this inspired Coke's marketing team to do something very similar. So, why do people still repeat the myth of Coke changing Santa? Well, the actual truth that a sequence of illustrators developed on each other's ideas just isn't quite as memorable. Plus Coke have been a little sneaky as they actually claim Santa's jolly look all started in 1931 with Haddon Sundblom and Coca-Cola. Which isn't really true, as we've literally just seen very similar versions existed before this. But Coke can certainly take credit for popularizing and standardizing the final modern look of Santa. Before Coke, not everyone had the same image of Santa. He wasn't always red and jolly, and so if Coke hadn't needed to increase winter sales, and spent so much money to reinforce this Santa into public consciousness, then it is possible this Santa version wouldn't have become so prevalent. Of course, not everyone is happy about Coke hijacking Christmas like this. There's even been calls from health experts that Coca-Cola's Christmas lorry tour should be banned for false gifts of bad teeth and weight problems. So, why has Coke been so successful at attaching itself to Christmas? I mean, nowadays it's hard to imagine the holidays without Coca-Cola ads and images. I've literally heard people say, "You know it's Christmas when the Coke ads start." Well, perhaps one of the biggest factors in why Coke's Santa ads have worked so well is that Coca-Cola has always stayed the same. No big changes to their product, logo, colors or branding. I mean, they did briefly try with New Coke, but it backfired horribly, so they quickly changed back. And so by consistently running the exact same kind of ads every single year for the same product and brand, it reinforces the connection and becomes a tradition. In recent years, we've seen a huge rise of other brands running big Christmas ads that try to be more emotion-driven, like supermarkets pouring millions into ads that don't really focus on their products, but instead tell a story to try and associate their brand with Christmas. But despite this, nobody comes close to Coke. Coke have been running their Christmas ads for nearly 100 years now. The association is deeply embedded. And for Coca-Cola, it's extra easy because they can repeat pretty much the same campaign each year. So whereas most companies have to come up with something new every year, people expect to see Santa with a Coke in the Coke trucks. In fact, some people get mad at Coke if they don't do the same thing. And so when people ask why do Coke spend so much on advertising when everyone already knows about their product, the answer is they're not advertising to make you aware of their product. They're advertising to create associations in your subconscious, so that when you go to the shop and there's a row of different colas, you're instinctively drawn to Coke. This also helps explain the Pepsi paradox, which is the concept that in blind taste tests more people prefer Pepsi. But given the visible choice of options, more people prefer Coke. It shows that people feel more connected to the company. And there's no doubt the billions of dollars Coke has spent to weave their product into Christmas has played a big role in that. And that is how Coca-Cola stole Christmas for its marketing efforts, and thus created one of the most powerful branding associations in the world. The crazy part is that Coke didn't even start out as a soft drink. It started out as a dodgy patent medicine. And if you want to know the insane full history of Coca-Cola, just click here. Finally, if you are watching this at Christmas, I just want to say thank you for all your support this year. You are a legend. Cheers.